Welcome to The Recovery Show with Dr. Joe and Angelina. For the next 2 hours, we'll be discussing addiction, recovery, and human connection. I'm a double board certified addiction physician practicing here in Newport Beach and Costa Mesa. I'm joined by Angelina, an associate clinical social worker who also works in the field of addiction and mental health treatment. Tonight, we hope to inform you, connect you to the people who can help you, to help you take on life a little bit better prepared than when you started. It's The Recovery Show. I'm Dr. Joe.
And I'm Angelina.
Welcome back to me. I had a week off.
You did. Welcome back. It's good to have you back in the studio.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, we missed you last week.
I couldn't tell you. There was a show that I didn't want to miss. It was last week's show.
We knew that.
I
We
know.
really did. Everybody in this studio knew that.
First of all, I've been waiting for Jason Waller to come on the show for a long time. Jason and I go back to when I was in treatment, and that's where I met him. And to have him come on this show, especially with his experience and where he's been before.
Right, and to be taken out the way you were so unexpectedly. But you did take care of yourself, and that was really important.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to talk for 2 hours, first of all, which might have been a good thing.
And you did call in, though. You did call in.
I did. Yeah, I need to reread the book, The Egoless Self. Right. I really do.
No comment. But you are looking much, much better. But I'd like to talk about that experience that you had. First of all, on the other side of it, looking at you and experiencing, I guess, seeing you go through that, at least for the first 24 hours, was not comfortable. But I'll talk about that in just a moment.
Sure.
How did you feel going through what you went through and having to take what you needed to take for those 24 hours? Talk about that.
Well, you're probably what you're talking about is probably not what everybody's thinking is the pain that I went through, but it was the experience that I had to take after being more than 5 years sober, about 5 years and 3 months sober now. So being 5 years and 3 months sober, you think you've got some kind of defense against or that you're prepared for when you have to take opiates in this case. And, if you're an addict or an alcoholic out there, there are times when you're going to have to take pain medication.
And explain those situations. What type of situation?
Acute pain. Acute, self-limited, short-term acute pain.
Right.
And that's what opiates really are used for.
Exactly.
And this qualified. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was supposed to get one wisdom tooth removed, and when I got there, they all looked like
they needed
hell.
to come out, right?
And they all needed to come out. And, the procedure was great. I get knocked out with propofol, so it's not really too much of a trigger. But when I wake up, I'm handed a prescription of Norco, 7.5 milligrams, 30 of them. Now, and I know that 30 is going to be way too much for what I'm about to, experience. But there was a part of me that thought that, the dentist knew what he was talking about, and this might be protracted pain. It might be a couple of days. And it's one tablet every 3 hours, every 3 to 4 hours, which is fine by me.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
But I looked, part of me, and there was a little voice in the background, like all addicts do when they experience this. The expectation, the anticipation of getting drugs is that, okay, this is finally legal,
like you've got permission.
That's about 5% of my brain, which is being suppressed into the back by the 95% that's saying, you know what, we're going to do this right. I'm going to give you the bottle, obviously. I'm going to have people monitor it, count the pills, and I'm going to take it as prescribed. One pill in, the whole experience changed. And for what I thought I was prepared for, I was not. And it was an incredible flip of the brain that I did not expect.
Explain what that means, flip of the brain. What are you talking about?
It was a flip of a switch. It was an obsession that I hadn't dealt with in 5 years. All of a sudden coming back. And I needed it. I actually did need the pain medication. It was extreme. Having 4 wisdom teeth that you didn't expect to have removed, it hurts, especially when you're bleeding all over the place, and
So how did you get through that? What did you do once that switch went on? How did you work through that? Because, like you said, you needed it for the acute pain, but you also had this psychological war starting to go on by the sounds
well,
of
you
it.
have the voice in the front, and then you've got the voice in the back. The voice in the front says, well, you're going to take this as prescribed, which I did, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. And the voice in the back is saying, well, yeah, we're going to see what happens tomorrow, and we're going to need to figure out how we're going to get 2 instead of 1, because 1 may not work, but what you're really thinking is, 2 is going to feel better than 1. And so those arguments between the front of the brain voice and the back of the brain voice started arguing, and it's a very subtle argument at first. When it really reached its it reached its peak was the following day, where I knew the pain wasn't bad enough, but I knew it could have, I could have talked myself into maybe another day, and probably talked you into another day of medication.
Just so you know, you couldn't, by the way, but you think you could have.
I thought I could.
Yeah, no. Anyway, keep thinking that, but the thing is, you didn't.
So I just remember drinking my coffee and talking to you, and just back and forth, and we were talking about something completely unrelated to my pain or the medication, but all I was thinking in the back of my head is, how am I going to make this look natural? And what is my pain really going to be like today? So I am worried about the pain, but I'm also having that conversation in the back of my mind. So what I did was, it just got so loud after a while that I excused myself. I went to go grab the bottle, and I handed it to you, and I said, please get this the hell out of the house right now. Just because I didn't want to even have that argument. I'd deal with the pain if I had to. If that pain came back the way it did the day before, I would have rather dealt with that pain than have to have that conversation in my head again.
And interestingly enough, you started taking ibuprofen.
Oh, yeah.
And how
it
did
was
that work?
Fine.
Right.
It's totally fine.
And being on the other side of that, being the loved one, seeing this struggle that you went through for those 24 hours, I could see it. And I knew, but I also knew you were in acute pain. And I also knew that that you needed it for that limited amount of time. I wasn't exactly sure for how long, but I had some people tell me about 12 hours, 24 the most. So I also knew that I couldn't tell you that you needed to stop taking them, that this had to be your decision. So I thought, or I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, okay, he needs to come to me and he needs to do exactly what you did. Because if I started to come back at you and say, hey, you need to give me those before you did, that probably would have been a problem too. So I'm glad it happened the way it did, because it probably wouldn't have been me. It would have been your sponsor, the one that should have had that conversation with you, not me.
Well, we had had a number of conversations, and when you're in it at that moment, the brain changes from minute to minute. The more opiates you take, the more the signals are turned on, the more the receptors are activated again. And it's amazing. If you're out there and you're wondering how fast it can come back in 1 or 2 doses.
It was incredible to see the switch.
You noticed, you said to me when I handed you the bottle that I had completely changed, that there was a...
Yes. Yeah, I saw I've only ever known you in recovery. And I'd never had the experience of seeing you any other way. So during those 12 hours of seeing you under the influence, it was a completely different person.
And I thought I was just fine. In fact, I thought I was a better version of myself again.
No.
So, the meds lie to you.
They completely lie to you. You were so disconnected. And that's one of the beautiful things about being with somebody in recovery. For all of those of you out there struggling with being in recovery at the moment, if you're in early recovery, it's such a gift you give to yourself and to those people around you. Even in those moments where you struggle with it, the fact that you're present is such a gift. And I
almost felt like I was having my own, kind of like on the air, like you and I sometimes. I felt like I was having my own conversation.
You pretty much
I was
were.
Talking to somebody else, and you were just present while I was doing monologuing, kind of.
I was just an observer.
Yeah.
And sitting back and looking at you having this kind of disconnection and this, like you said, this disconnected conversation with yourself. And I don't know what world you were in, but it wasn't in ours.
And I didn't realize it. That's the thing. Opiates do that to you. If you're an addict and you've had a history of opiate addiction, that's what it does to you. It lies to you, and you have no idea. It completely changes the mind. It completely changes the neurochemistry, and it does it quickly. And 5 years, 10 years, I've seen people relapse after 20 years.
And if you think the people around you don't notice, that's a lie too.
Yeah. You're getting chatty.
Oh,
I want to hear if anybody else has this experience out there. Have you had to take pain meds, and how did that turn out? Mine could have gone south real fast. My experience could have turned awful. I could have lost everything all over again.
You could have.
And you want to know something? If I didn't have the things in place in my life, that could have happened. And would it have been my fault?
Moving on. We have Steve H. in the studio.
Steve H.
Yeah,
we,
Steve.
kind of introduced you before.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and why did we have you on this show?
let's see. Where do I begin? Well, I was invited to come to the show probably about a month ago when you guys had, I think, a segment called Dads and Grads.
Yes.
Yeah, being a single father, raising a child, being through addiction, recovery, the wreckage that I had built for myself, including putting my daughter through that wreckage. She was CPS involved. I'll get to that in a little later because that's part of the journey.
Right.
How do I say this? I got lucky. I got extremely lucky. My story started back like when I was 5 years old. I came from a very well family. And they would have these soirees and parties on Friday and Saturday nights. And my grandfather used to think it was, I look back at it and I try to think, his thinking was, give the kid alcohol, he'll pass out somewhere. We don't have to worry about the kids. Mm-hmm. Well, he would give me wine. I would flop around the party and be laughed at. That stuck with me psychologically. Being a child at that age, I was the center of attention. Mm. So that stuck with me. And alcohol was a big part of our family. My grandparents were alcoholics, and we had an unlimited supply of alcohol. We had it in the garage, in the fridges, and I think one cupboard had pots, pans, and dishes, and the other 25 cupboards were alcohol.
Oh, wow.
So I would continue drinking, and then when I got to about the age of 11 or 12, alcohol started to take its effect as far as, I don't want to say criminal, but
Wait, so
legal.
So you drank steadily from 5 years old to 11 years old?
Not steadily, but not appropriate for a 5-year-old. I would say, if I had to give it 30 to 50 times a year, while I was probably 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It got to the point where I was 7, 8, 9, 10. My grandpa wouldn't give it to me. I would go out to the garage and get in to the fridge, and they had wine coolers and stuff, and I would drink a couple of those and come in the house. Because psychologically, I wanted to be the center of attention. I wanted to be the focus of everybody. And that's what stuck with me up until 11, 12 years old when I started having legal problems with the law. Because I would do things, I wanted people to talk about me.
So let me ask you a question. You're talking about drinking between 5 and 12. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, first of all, even as a therapist. What did it do for you at that age? You're talking about being in the center of attention. I'm trying to understand that a little more too. So tell me about what being the center of attention meant for you between those ages. What did it do?
Well, there was other parts that played. My mom, my stepdad at the time, my father, I didn't know who my real father was. My stepdad, he was involved with an NFL pro team back then. They didn't call them equipment managers. They called them equipment personnel. Mm-hmm. And so he was always on the road. And while he was on the road, my mom, God rest her soul, she would have her boyfriends in and out, and there was no attention paid to me. So I needed to do something, whether it was positive or negative, but mostly negative, to get that attention.
Sure.
So, and to do that stuff, I would have to be, I don't want to say drunk, but drunk.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. That
That's-
makes sense now.
But that's interesting. Most kids can experience that center of attention just by acting goofy, by being the clown. Were you kind of were you shy as a young kid without alcohol? Did you actually need it, and was there a euphoric
Yes.
effect?
Yes, that carried
Okay.
on because I know that later on in my years, when we went to clubs and stuff, I was one of those people to stand to the side and shake my head like the Roxbury and watching everybody else dance. But you get a few drinks in me, I'm John Travolta. I'm out there on the floor.
Nice.
So but yes, alcohol did. I needed to have that in order to bring me out of my shell, so to say.
And did your mom pay more attention to you when you were drunk?
Oh yeah. She would have to, put me in bed. I would get sick. She would have to be by my side, And I remember, still remember to this day when I was that age. And then it progressed. My mom, she also got involved in cocaine. I remember at 9 years old, I would stand in the hallway beating on her door because I'd be starving. Mm-hmm. And mom, I'm hungry, and the old words, I'll be out in a little bit, and I'll be out there in a while. And I remember at that age telling myself, God, if I ever have kids, I will never be like her. I will never do this. How could she do this to me? Mm-hmm. So I would go do something destructive. I'm not going to say what I did. It's rather cruel, but I did things to where it got her attention.
Uh-huh.
And to the point where they at one time wanted to refer me to a psychiatrist or psychologist. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I'm not doing this because I'm crazy. I'm doing it because I want attention. Mm-hmm. So after, when I hit 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, I started going to juvenile hall. I went to a place called Los Prietos Boys Camp twice. I still remember my camp number, 4189. And it progressed. And what's funny is when I got to school, loved school because I played sports. I was a very gifted athlete. Mm-hmm. By the time I was 15, 16, 17, in high school, when colleges came to scout, my name was brought up. But I was living a 007 life. Fridays, when we had to wear our jerseys for our games, I would wear it on the school campus. But during nutrition break, I would take my jersey off, throw on a regular shirt, go off campus, and go drink. So eventually it caught up to me.
Yeah, it's hard to be a good athlete when you're just destroying your body like that.
I wasn't being a good athlete. I got caught. I wasn't very good at hiding.
Oh, okay.
Drinking.
Change that story.
Yeah, my coaches caught me, kicked me off the team. I wanted back on the team. I figured I needed attention. All this time, I'm doing things at school. There's a lot of things I did in junior high school. Tried to burn the school library down.
Typical teenage stuff, though.
Yeah.
Yes and no. So if you want to join in, Steve, you've got kind of an interesting history here, which was probably a common theme for some people. I'm sure this probably resonates with some people out there. And if you want to get in on the conversation, the number is 949-650-1015. Steve,
I'm hearing a narcissistic fueling of this.
A little, but I'm also hearing the negative reinforcement of behavior. It's kind of like that attention seeking, and because it was getting attention, the negative activity was getting attention. It's like, I'm going to keep doing this because every time I do this, it gets noticed.
Well, yeah, and it also becomes this saying that we become a product of the environment that we're in.
Of course.
I chose to hang around with kids when I wasn't playing sports. I hung around with people that back then they had in school they were known as loadies. Then you had the jocks. Then you had the spandies.
What are those?
What are the spandies?
Oh, spandal people back then that were basically into like the tubes and.
Like spandex bands.
Yeah,
Oh, very cool.
we call them spandies. They were just, back then I looked at them, they weren't right in the head.
Oh, okay.
Actually, they're probably the only ones that were right in the head. I chose to hang around people that, now I look back at it, they didn't have dreams, they didn't have ambitions, they didn't have goals. Smoking pot, doing coke, doing a lot of psychedelics. And when we hang around and put ourselves in that environment, we become part of it. You know, why would I want to hang around with people that are doing good, have all these goals and dreams and stuff like that, and have them perceive me as, a loser? When I hang around with my friends and stuff, and I'm throwing beer bottles at fire engines and doing stuff like that, I'm talked about. I'm like praised.
You're a movie star.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a rock star. Yeah. And if somebody did something that their name came up and was being talked about, I had to go do something better.
Yeah.
Which always meant to some kind of legal action.
Oh, jeez.
You know, and it was great because when my grandparents were the type that my last name used to be Steve Babcock, and my grandfather and them were very well known, and he finally one day had enough of it, and he said, "Look at you, you're tarnishing our name." What happened to that little boy that I knew at 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9? Well, back then I didn't want to say, "Well, you started this."
You got me drunk.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to say that.
Right.
So, and I was just like, really? Well, screw you. I'll just go change my name. I changed my name back to Hoff, my original father's name.
Right.
Even though I didn't know him. I didn't want to tarnish his name.
Wow.
So as time went on, and then finally at 17 and a half, I decided to go into the military.
Really?
Yeah. It was to the point where every police officer in town knew my name.
So that's really interesting. Let me just bring something up here. From the time you were 5 until the time you were 17, the one thing that you were probably seeking was structure and accountability, right? Because that's something that children crave. They need accountability and structure in order to flourish. And it was probably something you really, really lacked. And going into the military, what do you have?
Or did you even know what that even looked like? And were you going into the military because you could be another star and it was a new iteration of being that, like, okay.
Yeah, I wanted
what you perceived in Apocalypse Now or movies that you'd seen. And
well, no, basically when I was about 17, I started hanging around with people. Basically, they were ex-military. A lot of them were actually convicts. They were on parole, and I would hear them tell them stories like, on the yard and in prison and stuff like that. And at that age, it was to the point where I didn't want to go to prison, but I kind of did, because when I was around them, I didn't feel I had a story. So instead of going there, I chose the latter, to go into the military. Going to prison didn't appeal to me. Mm-hmm. So I went into the military, did my 4 years. In fact, it was great, and it wasn't. In basic training in AIT, it was like that movie Officer and a Gentleman. My drill sergeant proceeded to kick my butt in front of everybody. I hit him once.
You did.
I struck him
first. Oh my goodness!
And I didn't get another lick in. He proceeded to set me straight. Mm-hmm. That was probably the first time I needed that. After that, I was set kind of straight. I finished out basic training in AIT, and then I received my orders, and I thought that I was going to go home for leave, and it wasn't. I had reported to Lawton, and they flew me over to Texas, and then I was over to New York and on a plane for Germany. And when I got there, oh boy, whole new world. When I got there, it was all about, I was okay for the first few months because I was basically scoping things out. Because when I found out I was in an outline unit, 44 Americans, worked with special weapons. And when you're over there, they give you a ration card. And you're allowed 2 liters of hard alcohol or a half gallon, 3 cartons of cigarettes.
A day?
I learned how to black market very quick.
Oh my goodness.
And that fed it. And then I met people, started doing things. I hope there's not any statute
what year
of limitations.
Is this? No. What?
1982.
Okay.
1982, 83, because I was 17 and a half.
So not a lot going on militarily around.
No, the biggest thing that happened when I was there, when I was basic training, is when the
Falklands?
When the Russians had shot down a jet airliner.
Uh-huh.
And everybody was talking about how we were going to war, we were hyped up, gung-ho. But no, the Falklands, yes.
Yeah.
But nothing that the biggest thing we got was when we did maneuvers or trainings. That was our biggest thing. Other than that, we were downrange. We would overlook our special weapons. and then we'd be off for 3 or 4 days.
And you drink and drink.
Oh, heavily.
Oh, I know. The military,
Heavily.
unfortunately, there's a lot of alcoholism.
Well, it's not only that. Over there, basically, when you got there and we landed in 21st Placement in Frankfurt, the first thing I saw was like some 13 and 14-year-old kids drinking.
Yeah.
And they put you in the train station, the Bonau. And their motto back then was basically, if you can reach the bar or over the bar, you can drink.
Yeah.
But of course, if you're American military, it doesn't matter. You got the green light. You can do basically whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So when that all took place, when I came back from the military, I was 21 and a half. And God, this is really bad because I was only back for 6 days, and an incident happened. We were at a party. It was like a welcome home party and a birthday party combined. There was an altercation, and the Santa Barbara sheriffs arrived. And I proceeded to get into it with the sheriff and hit him in the face with a beer bottle.
And how did that work out?
Great.
Worked out as a 5-year term in prison
Wow.
with 80% time.
Wow.
So, I went in the military, but then now I'm going here, and the strange thing is this is how I viewed it. When I'm in there, I'm thinking, now I'm going to have a story to tell when I come back.
Were you thinking that when this was happening, or was this kind of an impulsive?
It was impulsive. I
Okay.
was drunk.
All right.
So, and then when I got out, I got out when 25, I was almost a little over 25 years old. And it was about a month later, August 4th of 1990, I hit a park semi at 85 miles an hour because I had been drinking so much, and spent almost 7 months in the hospital. And I knew then I could not drink anymore. I couldn't. But I was already an alcoholic addict and didn't even acknowledge it, or I was in denial about it. Because when the alcohol stopped, as soon as I got out, I immediately picked up a substance. I started picking up cocaine. That worked out for a while. I can't even tell you how many years I did that. And then I moved on to opiates. And then when I got clean from opiates was a little over 16 years ago. When I detoxed off opiates, they didn't have Suboxone. They didn't have Subutex. They had methadone. I refused to do methadone. And I remember the kick. Like it was yesterday. I never, ever want to experience that again. And during this time, I just celebrated 10 years of sobriety, being clean and sober on May 28th of this year.
Congratulations. That's huge.
Thank you. During this time, I was in and out of prison for almost 20 years. I did a total of about 16 years. I was on parole for almost 20 years. I just had an epiphany on May 26th of 2007.
Yep.
Yeah, 2007, because in 2006, I was back in prison for a year. When I got back out on a violation, I got busted. I had moved on to manufacturing meth. And I got busted with a very significant amount of methamphetamine and cash. And at that time, I was carrying a loaded firearm. And when they searched the car and they found the money and the meth, about 70 grand in cash, about 6.5 kilos of meth. And when they found that, they didn't search the car anymore because they thought they'd already found everything. And if they would have just lifted up the tire compartment, they would have found a loaded 9mm.
Wow.
So when I was arrested, I'm sitting in jail. And on the night of May 27th, my parole officer, because I was on parole, my parole officer came and saw me and said, what were you thinking? You're looking at probably a minimum of 13 years.
Oh, jeez.
And I was just like, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm already thinking, how could I have done it? I'm thinking, what prison am I going to go to?
Yeah.
Do I know anyone? Do I know anyone there?
But exactly. I hope, because this was in Vista, and I'm from Santa Barbara, so we have the 805 from Santa Barbara. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, God, I'm going to be down here. That's not part of North California. The last thing he said to me a couple minutes later is he turned around, started to walk out, and he said, oh, and by the way, your ex was picked up and busted the other night, and your daughter is in Polinsky. and my daughter at the time was 7 years old.
What's Polinsky?
I call it kids jail, CPS.
Oh my God.
I don't know what happened at that moment, but I just know this is the first time I told my parole officer his name. I'll call him Jorge. But I told him Jorge, and he just turned around, looked at me. I said, "Get me out. I'm done." And he just looked at me, and he said, "What'd you say?" I said, "Get me out. I'm done." And he just said, "Yeah, right." And he walked out. I'm thinking, okay, then the morning of the 28th, I count the 28th as my clean date because left to my own device, if I would have been, I don't count jail May 26th as my actual clean date because I was incarcerated. I had no access. I mean, you can if it's in jail, but I just count the 28th because that was the day of my own freedom and my own choice of when I could have done something. But on May 28th...
That's impressive.
Yeah. About 4:30 in the morning, they called my name over the intercom and said to roll it up. And I started to roll my stuff up. I'm thinking, okay, here we go, chained to Donovan. They lined us up outside, and they called my name and one other guy, and they had us step over to the right side. And when they did that, they took everybody else out. And I'm thinking, oh, great, only 2 people. This is going to be a pleasant ride. They took me up to dress out, and they put me in street clothes and kicked me out to the street. And I'm thinking, this has got to be a mistake.
Right.
But lo and behold, my parole officer, Jorge, was standing out there. And, it's about 4:45 in the morning, dark, cold. And he says, "Don't make me look like a fool." Got in the car and drove off and left me standing there.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, like what just happened? I had so many multiple thoughts, like, I could walk to the dope man's house. I don't know what preceded it, but I took off walking, and I walked from Vista County Jail. I walked all the way to the North County Children's Services, which is on Oceanside Boulevard by the 5 freeway.
How long did that take you?
About 3 hours. And when I got there, I walked in and said, "Hey, you guys have my daughter, and I'd like her back." And they asked me, "Who are you?" And when I told them my name, they said, "We have you down as you're incarcerated." And I said, "Well, obviously I'm not. I'm here." And they said, "It doesn't work like this." And I was like, "What do I need to do?" And they're like, "You need to go complete a program. You need to have stable housing. You need to do therapy. You need to complete a SARMS program." And I was like, I had no clue. Where do I begin? And
What's SARMS?
SARMS, it's more of an intensive treatment where I had to test daily. They would call me at any given time and say, "You have 1 hour to report and to test." And then they overlooked...
That's tight.
Yeah, they overlooked the CPS. They're the ones that wrote the CPS reports. So what I'm doing, and that was a nightmare itself, because I would go, they would call me and say, "Hey, at the time, I was working for Caltrans. My parole officer helped me get a job because with my extensive record, I think I put out over 120 applications, and I was using, I can say this on the radio, McAllister Institute, their treatment program.
Yes.
And I walked from CPS to McAllister, signed up, and I slept across the street because I was basically homeless. When they did the house and did everything else, they basically, marshals locked it up. So I slept across the street behind a garbage can for almost a month. Wow. Until I was able to test clean with all the pot and everything. It wasn't the levels go down. It had to be completely out of the system. Once I was able to test clean, then they put me in their sober living house, that's where my journey of recovery actually began. And I'm so grateful. I'm extremely grateful for them. But I had problems with SARMS and with CPS because I would go to the SARMS office to test, and they did not have a male staff.
To observe.
They had 2 male staff. One was out on leave for, didn't know when they were coming back. And I remember the other one had a son that had been murdered. So he was out on leave for the time being. And I'm like, well, when I went to court, they were telling me because they would write weekly reports that I had failed to test. When in fact I came here every day you guys told me to, and to test, and no, you guys didn't have a male. So when I showed up and there was 3 females in there, I told them, one of you females are coming in with me to test me.
Yeah, definitely.
I know how you feel.
And at first they were like, well, no. And then one of them said, well, I'll go. I'll leave the door open and turn back. And I said, we're adults. I don't care. You can stand over my shoulder. So we did that. And like I did everything that they asked for. I went back to court for my daughter at 6 months. And like I was so agitated because the foster care they put her in, I mean, I'm granted that she was cared for, but she had long, blonde, beautiful hair, like down to her butt. And when they put her in the foster care, they immediately cut it like a boy. I mean, and I was devastated. She was devastated. During this whole time, more and more, I'm thinking, how did I put my child? Why did I put my child through this? How could I put my child through this?
See, you had to go through all this, though.
I had to do all this.
All of these things, your frustration with having a P test within an hour and not having somebody there, it's total helplessness. And you were put through all of these tests, the warrior's journey, you know what I mean?
Definitely.
The warrior's path.
It wasn't just one test, because I had to test sometimes 3 times in one day. I had to test for the McAllister program, I had to test for my parole officer, and then I had to test for SARMs.
That's great. Just keep making more urine. And you were clean, man.
Absolutely.
Isn't that the best feeling in the world? That's why you could fight as well as you did. So we have Steve H in studio, who's got an incredible story. So far, he's told us about the pain that he's been through, 15 years incarcerated. And we were talking during the break, and he had brought up a statement that you hear in meetings sometimes, that your worst day sober is better than your best day when you're loaded, when you're high. Steve disagrees with that.
Absolutely.
I want to hear about that.
Let's see. Well...
And have it wrap into your story.
Well,
where we left off, you just gotten into sober living, and
I've just gotten into sober livings. I would attend meetings involved in the recovery community, and people used to say my worst day clean is better than my best day high, and I argued with that, and I would make a point saying, look, when it was in the recreational and experimental stage of our substance abuse, there were some damn good days, you know. But then I have a sponsor, and my sponsor, like when I told him, he said, let me break it down to you, Steve. He goes, in all your years of using, which is minus the years of incarceration, 35 years, and in 15 years, how many good days were there actually? And maybe, he said, let's say 200 at most. And I was like, okay. And he goes, so you would take those 200 days of being loaded and being good as opposed to 14 years, 7 months, or whatever it is for 200 days of misery. And when I looked at it that way, and I was just like, damn. You know what? It's true. Now I see it in a different way. He's absolutely right.
But you want something, the addicted brain who has not had that spiritual fitness is going to go back and say, you know what? Those 200 days were pretty damn good. And unfortunately, the brain does remember the good things way better than it remembers the crappy times.
It glamorizes.
It does. I mean, when we look back in our addiction, we're not mentally stable. We aren't processing things right. Like people say, addiction is my disease. And this is just an opinion. My disease is what sits between my shoulders. Addiction is a byproduct of that disease.
It's a way out of the disease. It's an easy cure for the disease that doesn't last very long.
No, it does not.
Yeah. And
the wreckage that you accumulate from that, financial, relationships, employment, legal, everything that you accumulate. Like I remember in all those years, I would get bills and I wouldn't even open them. I'd just throw them in a drawer. Throw them in a drawer. Then when I was in sober living, that drawer went into plastic bags. So I had these plastic bags and I hadn't even opened them. When I got clean and started going through these things and I'm opening them up, within the first 60 days, for the people out there, I get it. When those 60 days and you have a moment of clarity and you start thinking, oh God, what have I done? It's not the end of the world. It's not. I tell people that when, like the men that I mentor, when they're like, when they say my life is shambles, I say, look, what is your most pressing issue? And when they tell me, I say, you know, you what is your issues? And they tell me them all. What is the most one that you think about, that rents space in your head?
Yeah.
And they tell me, I say, then everything else, put it on the back burner. Let's focus on that one thing.
That's great advice.
We're in a cesspool spinning.
Yeah.
So take that one thing, take a step forward, plant step, work on that. Only that. When you finish that, the cesspool will turn again and the next thing will come up. You know, and it's not going to take a day, it's not going to take a week, it might take a year. For me, it took a few years. But finally, I'm walking, I'm not spinning anymore. My wreckage is clean. You know, and I try to remember this, and I do. I don't buy into the lies. The brain, my disease lies to me every day.
Yeah.
It does.
What does it tell you? What are those lies?
Oh, the things you always hear. Oh, well, it's not that bad. You know what'll happen if you do this. You know, in all those years when I get loaded, I hate to say this. If I get loaded, I'm going to rob you. I'm going to get in your pocket somehow.
I hear that all the time. Don't worry about it. That's why I'm holding on to my wallet right now.
And my disease tells me, you know, that it's not like that anymore. Really? It's not like that anymore? I've been doing that my whole life whenever I got loaded. What makes me think that it's going to be different?
But Steve, I'm going to go back to my story in the beginning of the show, is that I have that thinking right now. I didn't have that thinking after I took my first pill. It almost like it just went away. So that's why I was kind of arguing, do we even have the choice?
We do.
You say yes.
We always have a choice.
Having had this experience, and everybody talks about their relapses, and relapse is not part of my story, but some people do claim that relapses help them put their disease into perspective and what they can and can't do. I'm going to tell you something. Although this wasn't a relapse, it was a really helpful experience, and I'll tell you one thing. Again, I learned one is way too many, and 100's not enough. That does ring true.
Absolutely. You had a choice, and you know, but see, you know, like Angelina was saying, you had a foundation. Mm-hmm. You realize that, and I don't believe that what you did was a relapse, not one bit. There's a reason we have doctors. There's a reason there's pain medications.
Yeah.
And what most people, or I should say addicts, fail to do is, in your case, when they get it, they'll read the bottles, take every 3 hours. They fail to keep reading the rest of the label if you turn that bottle and it says, or as needed. Mm-hmm. We'll focus on take every 3 hours. Okay, that's what we're going to do. You know? You had that foundationing to where you made, like I said, subconsciously, we make a conscious decision. Mm-hmm. You made, subconsciously, you knew what decision to make, and you made a conscious decision. So, and I give you props.
But let me go back to something you said. You said spiritual fitness based on what foundation, and what does that really mean? Steve, what does that mean to you?
For me, it means spiritually. I mean, for anybody out there, I'd love to hear what your definition of spiritualness or spirituality is. For me, it's being not only emotionally, mentally, and physically connected with myself. It's also with the surroundings I put myself into. Like I said at the very beginning, we become part of the environment that we put ourselves into. I heard you say in the very beginning that you had known people that went out with 20, that relapsed with 20 years. Well, I had a sponsor that had 36 years clean, a mentor, and he went back out. And that was a learning experience for me in recovery, because I had this man put on a pedestal. You know, and when he told me, in fact, it was during just after November, we were at Denny's. We were going through some writing that I had completed, and I asked him how his Thanksgiving was, and I was turning some pages, and he goes, "Oh, it was pretty good, you know," and I enjoyed a bottle of wine with my wife. It was the first time ever that I looked at somebody and their lips are moving, but I was hearing nothing.
Yep.
Because I was in beside myself, and the first thing I said, like, what did he just say?
Yeah.
Like, how could you? My next was basically, I didn't process. I've learned how to respond instead of react. But I reacted and said, I'm changing sponsors. And he just looked at me and he said, why would you do that? We've been working together for almost 4 years. And I told him, because I don't want to get to the point where I think I can have a drink.
Yeah, that's really irresponsible.
Yeah, I think that it's okay.
Right. So what I did was when I left his house, I went to somebody in my support group that had some significant amount of time, about 19 years at the time. And I was venting to him what happened. And finally, when I got done, he said, this is what I'd like you to do. Go home. Get a piece of paper and pen. Write down all the questions that you want to ask him. So I went home and I did that. I put it away. And then he said, I called him and he said, did you write them all down? I said, yeah. He goes, open up a book. Put those papers inside the book. Close it. Put it up in your closet. 3 days later, like I'm chomping at the bit. But 3 days later, I went back. He told me, now go home and open those up and look at those questions. When I went back and looked at them, I started crossing off the questions. That when I got done, I think there was 3 questions that I had out of, I don't know, I think I had 60 or 70 questions.
Oh, wow.
Like, how long have you been doing this? What was it going? Does your wife know? Does your children know? I mean, stuff that was irrelevant to me.
So they were all fear-based, resentment-based, ego-based, resentment-based. How could you do this to me? Yeah.
Like, well, not only that, not just to me, but how could you do that to your family?
To everybody, yeah.
Exactly. What about the other guys, my sponsee brothers? And when I get done, the first thing that I should have done is I should have been, if I would have had a little more recovery in me, is up to now, the knowledge that I've obtained should have been, what could I do for him at that time? I didn't know that. There's the sponsor I have now, man, I love this guy. He was part of my support group when I was doing the CPS thing. Mm-hmm. And at 6 months, we went to court, and my attorney was telling me, oh, dude, you've completed a program, you're stable housing, you completed SARMs, you did therapy, your daughter's coming home with you today because at the time, your significant other, my daughter's mother, I try not to talk bad about her or anything. She hadn't completed anything. Mm-hmm. So when we were sitting in the courtroom, and the judge is, Mr. Hoff, I see you did completed this, completed that, completed this, completed that. I commend you. Great job. Miss So-and-so, I see you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Okay, well, based on what I have here and everything, we're going to go ahead and grant custody to Mrs. So-and-so.
Wait,
sentiments.
what?
I seen the look, and then I'm thinking, my first statement out of my mouth, like I said, I was
hold
still
on. Do we have to dump this?
Yeah, no cussing, Steve.
I'm not going to. Well,
Okay.
I asked, how do I put it? I said, are you out of your rabbit butt's mind? And the judge looked at me and said, one more statement like that, Mr. Hoff, and we're going to put you back downstairs where you're so well known. And I was just like, how dare you? So I walked out of the courtroom. The first thing I did when I got out, my attorney came and walked out the doors. I looked at him and said, you're fired. And he's like, what? I just said, you need to get away from me. Mm-hmm. I go home. I called my sponsor and I said, hey, can you believe this and that? And first thing he said is, what's the positive in this? And I'm like, what positive? Click, he hung up on me. And I was like,
he is a good sponsor.
This has got to be a mistake.
Sponsor,
so I called him right back. And I said, hey, did you hang up on me? He goes, I asked you a question. What was the positive in this? And I said, there is no positive. They put her back with their mom. Click, he hung up on me again. I think I must have sat there 35, 40 minutes, and something clicked. Where I picked up the phone, I called him back, so I said, don't hang up on me. I think I got this. And he's like, what's the positive in this? I should be grateful that she's out of CPS care.
There you go.
And he goes, that's exactly what he said. Now you're getting it. There you go. That was probably the enlightenment when I first learned there is always a positive and a negative. Mm-hmm. Of 9 out of 10 people, if you put a glass down half full, half empty with water, and you ask that person, is that glass half full or empty? People very early in recovery or when they're getting on, I'm not going to guarantee it, but pretty much they would say that's half empty.
Yeah.
And psychologically, when we say that, everything that we encounter in life, a problem or anything else, we immediately jump to the negative. So, and I have a saying, and I think I told you this once, Angelina, that I stay away from the coulda, shoulda, wouldas.
You did tell me that, yes.
I could have done this. I should have done this. If I would have only would have done this. When you're in that mode, or when you're stuck there, you're going to stay stuck there. You're selling yourself short.
I agree.
So I get in. I have three different statements where I say, what can, what will, and what am. What can I do? What am I willing to do? And what am I going to do? When you're in that, life is pretty simple. It really is. You get into the solution really fast. And if you just do it, and everything's safe. People say that money is the root of all evils. I disagree.
Oh, explain that one, because I know a lot of people. This is a tough time for a lot of people.
It's how you pursue money that could be the root of evil.
Well,
yeah.
Give me your answer, Steve.
Fear is the root of all evil. Fear of not having money. Mm-hmm. Fear of, being inadequate. Fear of somebody not liking me. You don't like me, and I know you don't like me. I'm going to come up with the reason not to like you first. Fear is the root. When we everything is fear-based. When we step out of the fear, or when we face things, or we face something that we are really fearful of, and we overcome it, life gets simpler. It really does, because we can reflect back on, hey, remember this?
Well, I'll tell you something. Fear is lack of trust. Okay, and what you develop in a program that you're talking about is that you get to practice this trust. And if you're really good, you get to practice it on a daily basis. And if you're really lucky, you've got a community around you that's going to support you when that trust doesn't work out. But eventually you're going to do it enough times where you trust in the and don't be in the results business, as we say, right?
Absolutely.
That's where we get, it's the fear of not getting what we want, and it's the fear of not wanting what we've got. You know what I mean? It's both of those.
It is. The fear of not having what we want. What's stopping you from getting it?
But also, I think expectations, and thinking that you have to have something that maybe you don't really need.
Well, I have a saying for that too. Expectations lead to disappointment. Disappointment leads to resentments. Resentments, in my case, no bueno, no good. Mm-hmm. I can turn a resentment, and that's a justifiable cause. I know for me, a resentment can take me out. That's why I said I've learned how to respond instead of react. When an incident happens, how
does a resentment take you out, though? I mean, okay, so resentment leads to anger, and then what?
Anger for me before I got into recovery. When I was angry, I would go.
You would start scheming. You would start revenging. You would start to you would do things that you would
get loaded first, and then that would step in.
Got it.
Like, how am I going to take? It was trying to find, and I've had to learn to find alternative measures or alternative activities to fulfill that. When we take away the drugs, your life is like a pie. You have your employment, you have your friends, you have your activities, your hobbies, and then you got your drug use. With that drug use comes with the activities and everything else. So when you take that away, you're left with a big void. Mm-hmm. What are you going to fill that void with? If you don't find something to fill that void with,
all the old stuff's eventually going to seep back in.
Absolutely.
It's guaranteed.
I know that from experience, not from myself, but I've seen that. I've been working. In 2007, I started taking CAR classes, which is California Association of Addiction Recovery Resources, and I became a certified counselor, case manager, and I worked for a nonprofit program, McAllister Institute, and I'm grateful for them. They actually gave me a job because I worked for Caltrans while I was on parole, and that was just a program for parolees. Mm-hmm. And I was just having problems finding employment. I mean, I did the footwork, but nobody would hire me. And the CEO owner, G. McAllister, and I was just still in their sober living, came and saw me and said that, Steve, if I see that you hang around here. And I said, yeah, because I don't want to go anywhere else. It's not safe for me or safe for society.
That's honest.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And she was just like, would you like to answer the phones in the office? And I'm like, really? Like, she gave me that bit of self-esteem, and my counselor did too, because, you know, this is why I love the job I have today. Was when I was working there, my counselor, I would come in and sit in her office for 5 minutes because I felt like the biggest piece of trash. And she would take her glasses and look me in the eyes, stop whatever she's doing, and give me 5 minutes of her time. And that little bit of doing that gave me just a little self-esteem, and it was enough to where I could build on that and say, I am worth this. I am worth something. And it's brought me to where I'm at today.
Now, how does that carry over in your professional life now?
I ended up leaving there. I got involved in a relationship, got engaged, moved away. Things didn't work out. And there's a story behind that. I came back. And when I got back here in October 11th of 2015, a friend of mine was working for the program that I'm at now and said, hey, we could really use a male staff. And I went up and interviewed. They hired me on the spot. And I love what I do because when I was working at the program I was at, I had such a caseload, a lot of clients. And I know how it is for somebody to come in and you can't even put down your pen and paper and you're asking them questions, you're writing, you're not even looking at them. I'm the type of person, somebody does that, I'm thinking to myself, you're not even hearing me, you're not listening, you don't even give a damn.
Yeah.
So I made the transition. Where I'm at today, we have a low number of clients. We only carry 6. And I think we have the best clinical team that I've ever encountered as far as in recovery. I work for a doctor that is amazing.
Yeah.
And the team that we have, every individual actually genuinely cares for the client.
I got to tell you something, Steve. You've said a lot of things that have impressed me tonight, and a lot of things I can learn from. You know, having 5 years under my belt, I expected to have everything that you had at 10 years, at 5 years, and you know, I have to admit, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I don't usually like to bring this up on the air. But you know, my relationship with my daughter, who's 11 years old. It's funny that you'd mentioned that time. Like I couldn't even imagine having a drug talk with her, just because I'm not even at that conversational point with her yet. I don't know what kind of damage you had with her, but there's a lot of mending that needs to be done, and there's a lot of outside interference that I've had to be good with myself. I don't know if you had those experiences too. Was there a lot of things that you had to, a lot of walls that you kind of had to butt your head against, and then realize that those walls were not breaking?
Yeah, I mean,
some examples.
I had to look at my life and what I was portraying as a male role model and as a father. When I was incarcerated, we get prison ducket pictures, and I would send those home. I know that I probably had about 3.5 or 4 years. I had this blue shirt, button-up shirt, and I used to wear it. My favorite color is blue. But I would wear this shirt, and one day she made a comment where she said, Dad, that picture or that shirt looks like the shirt and pictures that are in the photo album. And I'm like, photo album? So I went, yeah, she went and got it. And here's my prison ducket pictures, me squatting down with all the, the homies. And I was just like, really, this is how she associates this shirt back to that. So I went and got rid of the shirt. Like, I had to change things to have her give her a new perception of who I was, which is, I can't tell you how to do that. That's something that you have to learn on your own. But you'll know when you're doing it, because then you'll see your daughter opening up. Like, okay, my daughter, she's my daddy's little girl. When she was in junior high, I used to make comments like, she'd be like, oh, she would talk about a boy, and I'd say, like, what's his name? What does he look like? Mm-hmm. Where did she hang out at school? And she's like, Dad, do I need a job? I found out probably within 3-4 months she was not talking about boys anymore to me or anything else like that, because I think she was literally scared that I was going to go to the school and have a talk with the boy. And I had to tell her, Kels, I was only doing that. So I had to eliminate.
I can't blame her from the first half, from what you told us,
Right.
the first half of the show. You can't blame the kid, though.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
If we had another 3 hours, I could tell you stories. I had to change that. In order for her to have an open line of communication with me, because I saw that I was doing more damage, even though it was playful, but it was, to her, psychologically, doing more damage to where, like, I caught it and was just like, uh-oh, I better stop this because she's not talking to me about, but I want her to be able to tell, now we're back to where she can tell me anything.
So she was 7 when you got sober.
Yes.
Okay. Was there any resentment in that 7-year-old when you first got, when you first came around? Well, she had been in Child Protective Services.
Child Protection Services, but I was also, from her age of when she was almost a year until she was almost 5, I was incarcerated. So when I got out and I came to the house and knocked on the door, and her mom answered the door, and she was standing behind her, I was like, hey, boo-boo, and she kind of, like, she...
Backed away from you.
Backed away behind her mom's leg, and I was just like, whoa.
Don't you know who I am?
Yeah, I wasn't there. The foundationing,
Yeah.
they say of a boy's mind is between 1 and 7 years old, and the foundation of a female's mind is between the age of 1 and 5. I had missed those years. She basically didn't know who I was. So I had to build that relationship back as well. That probably took until... God, she was 7. She would come to meetings with me, and she would want to hang out with the kids more than she would with me. And, of course, the pride and ego thing, that kind of hurt to where I was just like, God, she's with me, and I only get a few hours with her. Why isn't she... I had to remind myself she's a kid. Mm-hmm. And I still remind myself to this day, she's a kid. You only get to be a kid once. Mm-hmm. It's not like you can go back. That's why I try to... I don't spoil her. But, like, for Color Guard, I made a trip happen to where she was able to go to Spain.
Wow.
And then for this, when she graduates high school and everything's good, I want to take her to Italy. And it's not because I'm trying to buy. She's earned this. This is something she's mapped out. I want to experience this and I want to experience that. She hasn't come to me and said that I want to go to... I hear her talking about it with her friends. I want to make that happen.
Well, I hope it's not a secret because she's going to know now.
I doubt she's listening.
I can edit that part out if you need.
Yeah.
When we put it on the podcast.
We can always edit it out.
Yeah.
All right. That's okay. We gotcha.
I'm only kidding, boo-boo.
Listen, I don't think you've blown anything, man. I think you've done a pretty damn good job.
An amazing
job.
I
have so many people who've told me, like, after when I took my 10 years and my daughter presented my token, and it took me a while to regain my composure because she looked me in the eyes and she said, Dad, I hear you. People talk about, hey, so-and-so that you used to run with is either dead or they're in prison for 25 to life. And she goes, I am so glad that you're not one of those 9 out of those 10 people. And when she turned and she had told the meeting I was in, she said, I want to thank you for giving me my dad back. I was just like,
wow.
Like, yeah, it was like, I don't ever want to break that bond of trust with her again. Never. That would just be... How could I do that to somebody? Somebody that doesn't deserve
it would
this.
be worse than dying. Yeah.
Yeah, you might as well just go ahead. It's just... having a child is not a given. It's a blessing. Mm-hmm. There's people out there that can't have children and stuff, and they'll adopt, and God bless them that they adopt and stuff. But when you have that, for me now, I see this. I didn't see this 10 years ago, but you need to give that child every opportunity, not just, to make it this far in life, but to open the world and let her have a chance to do anything that she wants.
don't force it.
How do you not, though? I mean, there's such an urge to just...
You'll know. I mean, just that instinct of when you're talking to them, the body language, like if you're sitting there talking to them, and you know, first of all, you take the distractions away. If you're gonna have a talk, like I believe in the old days when people used to sit around the dinner table at dinner, TV off, having dinner, talk about your day, what's going on, how are you doing in school. I believe in that. Nowadays, you got people that are sitting around, they're eating on a TV chair, they're just sitting there eating on their phone, and you know, the world goes by, you know nothing.
Yeah.
But when you take away the distraction, you're having that discussion with them, and then their body language, if they're just like, you know, yeah, okay, change it up. Find something that interlocks them and gets their attention. And then once you do that, it's just like with anything, you find the angle in a positive way.
It's because you're present.
Absolutely.
I think we're coming up to the end of the show, and I think you can
Oh,
also
wow.
make it,
Yeah.
and when that interaction occurs between your kids and you, and especially in early recovery, and maybe always, to not make it about you,
It's never about, with her, it's never about me.
right?
She says it is. But I tell her, you know, it's about you, boo.
Yeah.
Like, I'm teaching her how to drive.
Oh, fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? Yeah, I'm doing that.
And I'll say this live, I don't know who's in more danger, the other drivers or me in the passenger side. No, but she does great. And like me being able to do that,
What a blessing.
it is.
Yeah.
I think I get more out of it than she does. You know, that, because I'm not going to be around forever. And what I'm doing is distilling memories for her. Like when I'm gone, she'll be able to pass it down. Yeah, your grandfather taught me how to drive. And,
That's pretty cool.
and you know, I don't want to be known as that person that I was previous to 10 years ago. I'm not trying.
You are.
I'm just being who I'm really. You know, before I was in my addiction, I was a scared little boy. That's all I really was.
The beautiful thing that you get to do now that you're in, 10 years now in recovery is you get to make new memories.
Absolutely.
And you get to give back all of this to so many other people.
It's been a pleasure having you on the show tonight, Steve. Thank you.
You guys,
so
thank you.
much.
Honor.
And everybody that's listening tonight.
Yes.
I want to thank Elisa for calling tonight. Rip, great job. Gia, thanks on the phones. Austin, awesome video work. We're on YouTube now, so
Keep an eye out.
search the Recovery Show. We're going to have about 4 shows live, including this show.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Steve, I wish we had you on our Father's Day show because you and Jason shared a lot of common threads. What I hear is selfishness, self-centeredness, gone. It's gone from the picture. If you can keep other people's interests in mind and keep giving back, I think an incredible life.
It's a process, and you need to keep working on it.
Well, I've learned a lot from you tonight, and I want to thank you for spending your Thursday night with us. Angelina, any closing?
Just an amazing guest, and thank you so much for your insight. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
For sure.
Next week we have Dan and Kevin, the directors of the movie Bill W.
Yeah,
in
Dan.
studio.
Dan coming back into the studio.
Dan Caracino and Kevin.
I don't have it in front of me right now.
Kevin, well, we'll respect his anonymity because we don't know his last name.
Yes.
It'll be great to have him in studio. I'm so blessed to have them come
I
back.
know, I'm excited. It's
Yeah.
going to be awesome.
All right, let's wrap this up. This is the Recovery Show. I'm Dr. Joe.
And I'm Angelina. Good
We'll see you
night.
next week.
It's never that bad. Taking up someone's been where you're at. Laid out on the floor, and you're not sure you can take this anymore. So just give it one.